My college roommate's bully is now my boss, and she has no idea about our connection. The conference room went silent when she walked in, and I felt my coffee cup slip from my fingers. It hit the table with a crack that made everyone turn, brown liquid spreading across my presentation notes, but I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Because standing in the doorway, wearing a tailored navy suit and that same confident smile I remembered from 10 years ago, was Veronica Ashford, the woman who destroyed my best friend's life, my new boss. She scanned the room with those ice-blue eyes, landing on me for half a second before moving on, no flicker of recognition. Why would there be? She'd never actually met me, but I knew her. God, did I know her. I'd been working at Meridian Analytics for 3 months when they announced the VP restructuring. I was a senior data analyst, comfortable in my role, looking forward to finally having stable leadership after our previous VP retired. The company-wide email came on a Monday morning. Please join us in welcoming Veronica Ashford as our new Vice President of Analytics and Strategy. There was a professional headshot, polished, authoritative, successful. My hands went numb reading her bio. Stanford MBA, 10 years of executive experience, multiple industry awards. None of it mentioned what she'd done to Nathan Chen during our sophomore year at Berkeley. None of it mentioned the 19-year-old kid who'd stopped going to classes, stopped eating, stopped existing in any meaningful way because of her systematic cruelty. Nathan had been my roommate in the dorms freshman year, and we'd moved into an off-campus apartment together for sophomore year. Quiet guy, brilliant with computers, planning to double major in computer science and mathematics. He was shy, a little awkward socially, but he had this gentle way about him that made him easy to live with. We'd stay up late talking about everything, philosophy, movies, our families, our dreams. He wanted to work in artificial intelligence, maybe teach someday. He'd come from a small town in Oregon, first in his family to go to college, and he took it seriously in a way that made me respect him immensely. Everything changed when he met Veronica at a party in October. She was a junior, president of her sorority, dating some guy on the lacrosse team. Nathan developed a crush on her, harmless, distant, the kind of thing most college kids experience and move past. He never approached her, never said anything inappropriate, just mentioned to a mutual acquaintance that he thought she was interesting. That's all it took. Within a week, Veronica had launched a campaign of psychological warfare that would have impressed military strategists. She started small, laughing when he walked by, whispering to her friends, pointing. Then it escalated. She created a fake dating profile using his photos and information, posting it on multiple sites with explicit, sexual content and his phone number. Nathan's phone wouldn't stop ringing, dozens of messages daily from strangers propositioning him, some aggressive, some threatening. He had to change his number twice. She photoshopped his face onto obscene images and posted them around campus with captions about sexual fetishes. She started rumors that he was a stalker, that he'd followed her home, that he'd sent her threatening messages. None of it was true, but enough people believed it that Nathan started getting hostile confrontations. Someone threw a drink at him in the dining hall. His professors started looking at him differently after Veronica filed a false complaint with the dean's office claiming he made her feel unsafe. I watched my friend disintegrate over the course of 6 months. He stopped sleeping, lost maybe 30 pounds, developed a tremor in his hands that never quite went away. He'd have panic attacks before leaving our apartment, convinced everyone was staring at him, judging him, believing the lies. I tried to help, or went with him to campus security, to student affairs, to counseling services. But Veronica was smart. She never left evidence. Everything was done through proxies, through her sorority sisters, through careful manipulation of social dynamics. And she was popular, well-connected, from a wealthy family that donated generously to the university. Who were they going to believe? Nathan withdrew from school in March of our sophomore year. I helped him pack his things, drove him to the airport. He was going back to Oregon, back to his parents' house, back to a life that had been derailed before it really started. Don't let her win, he told me before he went through security. His voice was flat, emotionless, completely unlike the animated guy I'd known. If you ever get the chance, don't let her get away with it. I promised him I wouldn't. Then I watched him disappear into the crowd and I never saw him in person again. We stayed in touch sporadically over the years. Nathan never went back to college. He got his GED, worked retail jobs, lived with his parents. Last I'd heard, about 2 years ago, he was doing better. I had started taking classes at a community college, was seeing a therapist regularly, had even started dating someone. But he'd never fully recovered from what Veronica did to him. The trajectory of his entire life had been altered by her cruelty, and she'd faced zero consequences. She graduated with honors, went to Stanford, launched a successful career. She got everything while Nathan got broken. And now she was my boss. Now I sat in meetings with her 3 times a week, watched her lead strategy sessions with confidence and charisma, heard people praise her innovative thinking and decisive leadership. She was good at her job. I couldn't deny that. She was smart, articulate, and had a talent for reading people and situations that made her effective, but I couldn't stop seeing the 19-year-old who'd systematically tortured my best friend for having a harmless crush. I couldn't unhear Nathan's voice on the phone at 3 a.m, sobbing so hard he couldn't catch his breath, asking me why someone would hate him so much when he'd never done anything to hurt anyone. The first few weeks were torture. I'd sit in her office during one-on-ones, discussing quarterly projections and data modeling strategies, while every cell in my body screamed at me to say something, to tell her I knew, to wipe that professional smile off her face. But what would I say? Hey, remember that kid you bullied out of college a decade ago? That was my roommate. She wouldn't remember Nathan. Why would she? He'd been nothing to her, just a target, a momentary source of entertainment. I was nobody to her now. Just another employee, competent enough to keep around, forgettable enough that she'd never connect me to Berkeley, to Nathan, to any of it. I started documenting, everything. Not consciously at first, not with any clear plan, but I noticed things. The way Veronica spoke to certain employees, always the younger ones, always the ones who seemed less confident. There was this edge to her voice, this subtle mockery that most people missed. She'd undermine them in meetings, questioning their competence in ways that seemed professional on the surface, but left them visibly shaken. I saw a junior analyst named Rebecca Tran leave Veronica's office in tears one afternoon, and when I asked her what happened, she just shook her head. Nothing, she said. I'm just not cut out for this job, I guess. But Rebecca was excellent at her job. I'd worked with her on multiple projects, and she was detail-oriented, creative, and hardworking. 2 weeks after that meeting with Veronica, Rebecca resigned. In her goodbye email, she mentioned pursuing other opportunities, but I overheard her on a phone call her last day talking to someone, maybe her mom, maybe a friend. I can't do it anymore, she was saying. Every day feels like I'm worthless, like I can't do anything right. I know it's all in my head, but I can't shake it. Except it wasn't all in her head. I'd seen how Veronica treated her. I started paying closer attention. Over the next 2 months, I documented 17 separate incidents where Veronica engaged in what I could only describe as psychological bullying. She'd praise someone publicly, then send them a scathing email privately, listing every mistake they'd made in excruciating detail. She'd assign impossible deadlines, then express disappointment when people struggled to meet them. She had this way of asking questions in meetings that made you feel stupid for not knowing the answer, even when the question was deliberately obscure or based on information she'd never shared. And she targeted specific people, always the ones who seemed vulnerable, who lacked confidence, who reminded me in some way of Nathan. There was Kyle Morrison, a 24-year-old fresh out of grad school, brilliant with machine learning algorithms, but socially anxious. Veronica circled him like a shark sensing blood in the water. Within 3 months of her arrival, Kyle had gone from enthusiastic and engaged to withdrawn and jumpy. I heard her mock his stutter in a meeting aisle subtly, wrapped in what seemed like concern. Take your time, Kyle, no rush, she'd said, but her tone made it clear she thought he was wasting everyone's time. Kyle stopped contributing in meetings after that. There was Diana Brooks, a 40-year-old single mother who'd worked her way up from an entry-level position over 15 years. Diana was meticulous, reliable, and deeply knowledgeable about our systems. But she wasn't flashy, didn't play political games, and Veronica seemed to view her as beneath notice. She'd cut Diana off mid-sentence in meetings, assign her grunt work despite her experience, and make comments about people who've been here too long getting comfortable. Diana had started job hunting. I knew, because I'd written her a recommendation letter. I kept notes on everything. Dates, times, witnesses, exact quotes when I could remember them. I started arriving at the office early and leaving late, partially to avoid Veronica, but also to observe. I noticed patterns in who she targeted and how. She was careful, always. Nothing she did would qualify as harassment in any legal sense. She never yelled, never made explicit threats, never discriminated based on protected characteristics. She was just consistently, relentlessly cruel in ways that were almost impossible to prove. 3 months into Veronica's tenure, our department had lost 6 people. HR attributed it to culture fit issues and competitive job market pressures. But I knew better. I'd seen this before. I'd watched Nathan disappear the same way these people were disappearing, slowly eroded, confidence destroyed, until they couldn't function anymore and had to leave. And just like at Berkeley, Veronica faced no consequences. Her superiors praised her for raising standards and pushing the team to excel. I thought about Nathan constantly during this time. I'd started calling him more regularly, casual check-ins that felt necessary in a way I couldn't fully articulate. He was doing well, still with his girlfriend Alyssa, still taking classes, working part-time at a tech repair shop. He'd even started talking about maybe trying to finish his degree someday. But there was still this fragility to him, this sense that he was held together with duct tape and determination. When I mentioned that my new boss had gone to Berkeley, he got quiet. "What years?" he asked. When I told him, his silence stretched so long I thought we'd lost connection. "That's when I was there," he finally said. "Different world now, man. Different life." I didn't tell him it was Veronica. I told myself I was protecting him, that he didn't need to know she was thriving while he was still struggling to reclaim what she'd taken from him. But honestly, I think I was protecting myself, because telling Nathan would make it real, would force me to do something, and I didn't know what that something should be. What could I do? File a complaint with HR about things that happened a decade ago at a different institution? Try to warn my coworkers about their boss based on ancient history? I felt paralyzed by the weight of what I knew and my inability to use it. The paralysis broke on a Wednesday in late August. I was working late, building out a data model for a client presentation, when I heard voices coming from the break room. Veronica and someone else. Kyle, I realized. I shouldn't have listened, should have made my presence known or left, but something in Kyle's tone stopped me. He sounded desperate. I've been trying to meet your standards, Kyle was saying. I've redone that analysis 3 times. I've worked weekends. I don't know what else you want from me. Maybe this job isn't the right fit. Veronica's voice was calm, almost kind, which somehow made it worse. There's no shame in admitting you're in over your head. Some people just aren't cut out for this level of work. I have a master's degree from Cornell. I was top of my class. I know I can do this work. Credentials don't mean much if you can't execute under pressure, Kyle. And honestly, your performance has been concerning. The stutter, the nervousness in meetings, the mistakes in your last 3 reports. It paints a picture of someone who's struggling to cope. The mistakes were because you changed the parameters after I'd already started. You told me to use the Q2 dataset, then said I should have known you meant Q3, and my stutter has nothing to do with my competence. Oh, I'm not saying it does, but perception matters in this industry, and the perception is that you're not ready for this role. There was a long silence. When Kyle spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. I think you're trying to make me quit. That's paranoid thinking, Kyle. Maybe you should consider speaking with someone about that. I heard footsteps, then the break room door closing. I waited 30 seconds, then walked around the corner. Kyle was sitting at one of the tables, head in his hands, shoulders shaking. I sat down across from him. I heard that, I said. I'm sorry. He looked up, and his eyes were red. Is it me? Am I really that incompetent? No. You're good at your job. Really good. And what she's doing to you isn't okay. But she's right about the mistakes, that she created by changing requirements and not documenting it. That's not incompetence, Kyle. That's sabotage. He stared at me for a long moment. Why would she do that? I almost told him then. Almost said, because she's done this before. Because she gets something out of breaking people. Because she destroyed my best friend the exact same way. But I couldn't prove it. Couldn't connect the dots in a way that would help Kyle, rather than make me look obsessed. So instead I said, I don't know. But you're not the only one she's targeted. That conversation changed something. Kyle didn't quit not immediately. But more importantly, he'd confirmed what I'd suspected. Veronica was still the same person she'd been at Berkeley. She'd just gotten better at hiding it, more sophisticated in her methods. She'd learned how to bully people within the acceptable boundaries of corporate culture, how to destroy confidence while maintaining plausible deniability. And she was doing it in my department, under my nose, while I did nothing. I spent the next 2 weeks gathering more evidence, but this time with purpose. I reached out to the 6 people who'd left our department, careful casual messages asking how they were doing. 4 of them responded. 3 of them, when pressed gently, admitted that Veronica had been a major factor in their decision to leave. One of them, a woman named Allison Crawford, told me she'd actually filed a complaint with HR about Veronica's behavior, but it had gone nowhere. They said her management style was demanding but not inappropriate, Allison told me. But it wasn't just demanding. She was cruel. She knew exactly how to make you feel worthless without ever saying anything explicitly wrong. I contacted our HR director, Anthony Kelly, requesting a confidential meeting. Anthony was in his mid-50s, had been with the company for 20 years, and had a reputation for fairness. I came prepared with my documentation, dates, quotes, witnesses, patterns. I laid it all out, trying to keep my voice steady and professional. I believe Veronica Ashford is engaging in systematic workplace bullying, I said. I have evidence of a pattern of behavior targeting vulnerable employees, resulting in an exodus of talent from our department. Anthony listened carefully, reviewing my notes. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and sighed. This is concerning, David. I appreciate you bringing it to my attention. But I have to be honest with you. This is going to be difficult to act on. Everything you've described is subjective. She's demanding. She has high standards. She gives critical feedback. None of that is against company policy. It's not about high standards. It's about targeting specific people and systematically undermining them until they leave. Do you have evidence that she's targeting them based on protected characteristics? Race, gender, age, disability? No, but wow. Then legally, we're in murky territory. And frankly, David, her results are excellent. Department productivity is up 18% since she started. Client satisfaction scores are at an all-time high. From the company's perspective, she's a star performer. Because she's driving out anyone who challenges her or shows weakness. The people who are left are the ones who can withstand the pressure or who've learned to fly under her radar. Anthony was quiet for a moment, then said something that made my blood run cold. Is there something personal here? Some history between you two that's affecting your judgment? I should have said no. Should have kept my distance, maintained objectivity. But I was tired, frustrated, and the weight of Nathan's suffering was pressing down on me. I went to Berkeley, I said. Same time she was there. I never met her, but I knew of her. She had a reputation. A reputation for what? I hesitated, knowing I was about to cross a line I couldn't uncross. For targeting vulnerable students and bullying them out of school. Anthony's expression shifted. Did you witness this behavior yourself? No, but my roommate... So this is based on decade-old hearsay about alleged behavior at a different institution. It's not hearsay. I watched what she did to him. I watched my friend fall apart because of her. David. Anthony's tone was gentle but firm. I understand you want to help your coworkers, but you need to consider whether your past experiences are coloring your perception of the present situation. Veronica has stellar references from her previous employers. She's been nothing but professional in her interactions with senior leadership. And what you're describing from college, even if it's true, doesn't mean she's the same person now. People grow, mature, change. I wanted to scream that she hadn't changed, that she'd just gotten more sophisticated, more careful, but I could see in Anthony's face that I'd lost this round. By admitting my connection to Berkeley, I'd undermined my credibility. Now anything I said would be viewed through the lens of personal bias. I left Anthony's office feeling defeated and foolish. I'd played my hand too early, revealed too much, and accomplished nothing except putting myself on HR's radar as someone with a potential axe to grind. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes, trying to calm down, trying to think. Then I called Nathan. He answered on the third ring, sounding happy. Hey man, what's up? I need to tell you something, I said, and I need you to stay calm. The happiness drained from his voice. What's wrong? Veronica Ashford is my boss. Silence. Then, Veronica from Berkeley? Yeah. Does she know? No. She has no idea who I am, no connection to you or that time. But Nathan, she's doing it again. She's targeting people at my company, the same way she targeted you. Younger employees, people who seem vulnerable. I've watched 6 people leave in 4 months because of her. More silence. I could hear his breathing, ragged and shallow. Nathan, you still there? I'm here. His voice was tight. What are you going to do? I don't know. I went to HR, but they don't believe me. She's too good at covering her tracks. And I made a mistake by telling them we went to the same college. Now they think I'm biased. Are you? Nathan asked. Biased, I mean. Of course I am, but that doesn't mean I'm wrong. Nathan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that shocked me. I want to help. Nathan, no, you don't need to. Yes, I do. David, do you know what it's been like for me? 10 years of therapy, medications, panic attacks, watching everyone from college move on with their lives while I'm stuck working retail and taking basic classes at community college? I've spent a decade trying to convince myself that what happened wasn't that bad, that I was weak, that I should just get over it. But it was that bad. She destroyed me. And if she's doing it to other people, if there's a chance to stop her, I want to be part of that. I don't even know what I'm doing yet. I don't have a plan. Then let's make one. Let me talk to my therapist, see what she thinks. Maybe there's a way to document what happened to me that could be relevant now. Pattern of behavior or something. I don't know the legal terms, but there has to be something. We talked for another hour, and by the end, I felt a shift in something fundamental. I wasn't alone in this anymore. Nathan wasn't the broken victim I'd been trying to protect. He was a survivor ready to fight back. We agreed to take things slowly, to be strategic, to build a case that couldn't be dismissed as personal grudge or ancient history. Nathan's therapist was Dr. Diane Foster, and she'd been working with him for 4 years. She specialized in trauma from bullying and harassment, and when Nathan explained the situation, she agreed to write a detailed clinical report documenting his experience and its long-term effects. More importantly, she connected us with a workplace attorney named Richard Brennan, who specialized in hostile work environment cases. Richard agreed to review our documentation in a consultation. The meeting with Richard was eye-opening. He listened to everything, my observations, Nathan's story, the HR complaint, Allison's experience, taking meticulous notes. When we finished, he sat back and steepled his fingers. First, let me be clear. What happened to Nathan in college, while morally reprehensible, isn't legally actionable now. Statute of limitations aside, it happened at an educational institution with its own policies and procedures. However, it does establish a pattern of behavior that could be relevant to the current situation. So there's something we can do? I asked. Maybe. But we need more. Right now, what you have is documentation of demanding management practices that, while unpleasant, don't necessarily constitute a hostile work environment. We need to prove that her behavior crosses the line into harassment or creates conditions that a reasonable person would find abusive. People are quitting because of her. Doesn't that mean something? It means something, but it's not proof. People quit jobs for lots of reasons. What we need is a smoking gun of evidence that she's deliberately targeting individuals with the intent to harm them, evidence of discriminatory animus, or evidence that the company knew about the problem and failed to act. HR knows. I filed a report. And they'll argue they investigated and found no wrongdoing. That's not failure to act. That's due diligence. What we need is for more people to come forward, for the pattern to become undeniable, and ideally, for Veronica to make a mistake that clearly crosses the line. Nathan spoke up. How do we make that happen? Richard looked at him with something like sympathy. You don't. You document. You support the current victims, and you wait for her to overreach. People like this, people who have a compulsion to dominate and humiliate others, they always eventually go too far. We left Richard's office with a plan. I would continue documenting, would quietly encourage other employees to file HR complaints, would build an undeniable paper trail. Nathan would work with Dr. Foster to create a comprehensive clinical report that could be used to establish pattern, and we would wait for Veronica to make a mistake. The waiting was agony. I went to work every day, sat in meetings with Veronica, pretended everything was normal while watching her methodically dismantle Kyle's confidence. He'd started calling in sick more frequently, and when he was in the office, he looked exhausted. I tried to support him, but there was only so much I could do without revealing what I knew. Then, in late October, Veronica made her mistake. Kyle had been working on a crucial presentation for a major client, months of data analysis culminating in strategic recommendations worth potentially millions in new business. The presentation was scheduled for a Thursday morning, and Kyle had been preparing obsessively, knowing his job likely depended on it going well. The Tuesday before, Veronica called a last-minute meeting and informed Kyle that she'd reviewed his work and found it fundamentally flawed. She gave him a list of changes that would require completely rebuilding the analysis with less than 48 hours to the presentation. I was in the office late Tuesday night when I heard a crash from Kyle's cubicle. I found him standing over his overturned chair, breathing hard, staring at his computer screen. She's wrong, he said when he saw me. The analysis isn't flawed. She's making me change it to support her preferred conclusion, not the one the data actually supports. Can you prove that? Yeah. I have all my work, all the data sources, all the methodology documentation. The data clearly supports my original recommendation. She's asking me to manipulate the findings. Kyle, this is important. Do you have that in writing? Her request for the changes? He nodded, pulling up the email. I read it carefully, and there it was. Veronica explicitly instructing Kyle to adjust. His analytical approach to reach a predetermined conclusion with thinly veiled threats about the consequences if he didn't comply. It wasn't quite a smoking gun, but it was closer evidence of professional misconduct that went beyond mere management style. Forward this to your personal email, I told Kyle, right now, and send me a copy too. Then document everything, the original analysis, the supporting data, the methodology, and the new analysis she's forcing you to create. Make it clear that you're making these changes under duress and that they compromise the integrity of the work. Kyle did as I suggested, and we spent the next hour documenting everything. Then I made a decision. We're going back to HR, but this time, we're not going alone. I reached out to Allison Crawford, Diana Brooks, and the other former employees I'd been in contact with. I told them what was happening with Kyle, explained that we had evidence of professional misconduct, and asked if they'd be willing to provide statements about their experiences. All four agreed. I also approached Rebecca Tran, who was now working at a competitor, and she not only agreed to provide a statement, but revealed something crucial. She'd secretly recorded one of her meetings with Veronica, where Veronica had berated her for 15 minutes, reducing her to tears. I knew no one would believe me without proof, Rebecca explained. So I started recording our one-on-ones. I have 3 recordings total. I didn't use them when I left because I was afraid of retaliation, but if it helps stop her from doing this to someone else, you can have them. The recordings were devastating. Veronica's calm, professional demeanor slipped in private meetings, revealing the cruelty underneath. She called Rebecca incompetent, lazy, and a waste of a salary. She told Rebecca she was an embarrassment to the department, and that everyone knows you're not cut out for this work. All while Rebecca tried to defend herself through tears. It was abuse, clear and documented. Armed with Kyle's email, Rebecca's recordings, statements from 6 former employees, and Nathan's clinical report establishing historical pattern, we went back to HR. Not just to Anthony Kelly this time, but to the Chief Human Resources Officer, Elizabeth Thompson, and with Richard Brennan representing us as a group. We requested a formal investigation into workplace harassment and hostile work environment. Elizabeth was a woman in her early 60s who'd built her career on protecting companies from liability. She listened to our evidence with an impassive expression, but I could see her mind working, calculating risk. When we finished, she turned to Richard. What are you asking for? A thorough, independent investigation into Ms. Ashford's conduct, interviews with all current and former employees in her department, a suspension of Ms. Ashford pending the investigation's outcome, and a commitment to take appropriate disciplinary action if the investigation confirms our allegations. And if we don't agree to these terms? Then we file complaints with the EEOC and the State Labor Board, and we explore the possibility of a class action lawsuit for intentional infliction of emotional distress. We also make this information public, including the recordings, which I imagine would be of great interest to your clients and shareholders. It was a calculated gamble. Richard couldn't promise we'd win any legal action, but the threat of public exposure and regulatory scrutiny was enough. Elizabeth agreed to the investigation, conducted by an outside firm specializing in workplace conduct reviews. Veronica was placed on paid administrative leave pending the outcome. The investigation took 6 weeks. The investigative firm brought in lead investigator Jennifer Huang with 20 years of experience, industrial psychologist Dr. Marcus Lane, and former FBI agent Robert Graves. They interviewed 32 current and former employees, reviewed hundreds of emails and documents, and listened to Rebecca's recordings. My interview lasted 3 hours. Jennifer took me through everything, including my connection to Nathan. "What happened to your friend establishes a pattern," she told me. "But it also means you have a personal stake. Be careful. Don't discuss this investigation with other employees. Let us do our job, and trust that the truth will be enough." The waiting was agonizing. Kyle was interviewed 4 times, looking more drained after each session. Rebecca's recordings became the cornerstone of the investigation. Dr. Lane analyzed them extensively, identifying what he called systematic psychological manipulation designed to erode subject confidence and self-worth through strategic deployment of criticism, gaslighting, impossible standards, and emotional abuse. Nathan's clinical report was included as evidence of historical pattern. Dr. Foster testified as an expert witness about the psychological tactics used in systematic bullying and how they manifest in workplace settings. She documented how Veronica's behavior had resulted in severe and persistent psychological trauma, including major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, and post-traumatic stress symptoms that continue to impact the subject's functioning more than a decade after the triggering events. I talked to Nathan almost every day during this period. "I'm having nightmares again," he admitted during one call. "Same ones I used to have back then. I wake up feeling like I'm 19 again, like the last decade of healing just disappeared." "We can stop this," I told him. "If it's too much, we can withdraw." "No, I need to see this through. If this investigation validates what happened, if it proves that what she did to me was real and serious and part of a pattern, then maybe I can finally stop questioning whether I was weak or oversensitive." Meanwhile, Veronica had hired employment attorney Gregory Thornton, who sent threatening letters demanding she be reinstated with back pay and a public apology. Elizabeth Thompson didn't budge. The investigation would continue to its conclusion, regardless of threats. The tension escalated when Nathan received a certified letter from Thornton's firm about potentially defamatory statements. Within 24 hours, our company's legal team sent a cease and desist letter making clear that witness intimidation would be met with legal action. The intimidation attempt backfired. 2 more former employees came forward, including Christopher Allen, who had secretly recorded a 40-minute meeting where Veronica systematically demolished his confidence. The investigation expanded. Jennifer Huang's team contacted Berkeley, which eventually provided documentation showing 3 separate students had filed informal complaints about Veronica's behavior during her time there. Nathan wasn't her only victim, and the pattern had been documented even back then. During those 6 weeks, I barely slept. I kept waiting for it all to fall apart, for investigators to decide that demanding management practices weren't enough, for Veronica's lawyers to find some way to discredit our evidence. I stayed in contact with Kyle, who was on medical leave for stress and anxiety. I talked to Nathan almost daily, and I could hear in his voice something I hadn't heard in years: hope. The investigative report was delivered the day before Thanksgiving. It was 93 pages long, and it was damning. The investigators found credible evidence that Veronica had engaged in systematic psychological harassment of subordinates through methods including but not limited to deliberate sabotage of employee work product, strategic undermining of employee confidence, creation of impossible performance standards, gaslighting regarding documented communications, and targeted emotional abuse. They documented a pattern affecting 9 different employees over 4 months, resulting in significant psychological distress and a toxic work environment. The investigators also noted the concerning parallels between the documented current behavior and Nathan's historical account, stating that while the college incidents couldn't be independently verified, they established a credible pattern of behavior consistent with current findings. Dr. Foster's analysis was cited extensively, particularly regarding the sophisticated nature of the psychological tactics employed. Veronica was terminated for cause on the Monday after Thanksgiving. She fought it with every resource at her disposal, and Gregory Thornton proved as aggressive as his reputation suggested. He demanded 18-month severance, full vesting of stock options, a formal CEO apology, and a public statement clearing her of wrongdoing. Elizabeth Thompson responded by offering Veronica access to the complete investigative report with one condition. If she accepted the original 6-month severance offer, materials would remain confidential. If she pursued litigation, everything would be produced in discovery recordings, clinical reports, Berkeley complaints, testimony from 11 employees, and the company would file counterclaims for investigation costs and department damage. "Your client's professional reputation can recover from a confidential separation," Elizabeth told Thornton. "What it cannot recover from is having recordings of her verbally abusing employees played in open court, covered by every legal news outlet in the country." Within 48 hours, Veronica accepted the separation agreement. 6 months severance, continued health insurance, and a neutral reference in exchange for comprehensive confidentiality and mutual non-disparagement. She also agreed not to contact any current or former employees and to withdraw all legal threats against witnesses. Kyle returned to work in January, but his recovery was slow and painful to watch. He'd been on medical leave for stress and anxiety, and when he came back, he was a shadow of the enthusiastic young analyst I'd first met. He startled easily, had trouble speaking up in meetings, and needed constant reassurance that his work was good enough. Diana Brooks, who'd been promoted to interim department head, worked closely with him, rebuilding his confidence bit by bit. She gave him smaller projects at first, celebrated every success publicly, and created a supportive environment where making mistakes was treated as part of the learning process rather than evidence of incompetence. I watched Kyle slowly emerge from his shell over the course of months. There was a day in March when he presented an analysis to the entire department, and his voice was steady, his conclusions were solid, and when he finished, he smiled, genuinely smiled, for the first time since I'd found him in the break room that Wednesday night. After the meeting, he pulled me aside. "I keep waiting for someone to tear apart my work," he admitted. "Every time I present something, every time Diana asks me a question, I brace for the criticism, for the implication that I'm not good enough. And it doesn't come. And I have to remind myself that this is what normal feels like. This is what work is supposed to be like." The emotional toll extended beyond the direct victims. The entire department had been affected by Veronica's tenure, and healing took time. Diana implemented regular one-on-one check-ins with every team member, not to evaluate performance, but just to talk, to understand how people were doing, to rebuild trust that had been systematically eroded. She brought in an organizational psychologist, Dr. Patricia Reynolds, who conducted workshops on healthy workplace culture, recognizing manipulation tactics, and speaking up about problematic behavior. The workshops were technically voluntary, but almost everyone attended, hungry for validation, that what they'd experienced wasn't normal, and for tools to prevent it from happening again. Rebecca Tran came back to the company in February, accepting a senior analyst position with a substantial raise and a direct reporting line to Diana. Her return was celebrated, but it was also complicated. She'd been gone for 8 months, and coming back to the scene of her trauma required courage. "I thought about not coming back," she told me over coffee her first week. "I thought about just moving on and never thinking about this place again. But then I realized that would mean she won. She drove me out, made me feel like I couldn't succeed here, and if I never came back, that narrative would stand. So I'm here to prove that I can thrive in this department, that what happened wasn't about my competence, but about her cruelty." The 4 other former employees who'd provided statements during the investigation, Allison Crawford, Christopher Allen, Diana Foster, and Marcus E. Wow, received settlements for constructive dismissal. The amounts were confidential, but I heard through informal channels that each received between 3 and 6 months of salary plus legal fees. More importantly, they received formal apologies from the company acknowledging that they'd been subjected to a hostile work environment and that the company had failed in its duty to protect them. Those apologies, more than the money, seemed to matter. It was official recognition that what they'd experienced was real and wrong, not just their perception or oversensitivity. The company also made systemic changes in response to the investigation. Elizabeth Thompson commissioned a full review of management practices across all departments, looking for similar patterns of behavior that might have been missed or normalized. They implemented anonymous feedback systems where employees could report concerns about management without fear of retaliation. They created a dedicated workplace, conduct office, separate from HR, staffed by professionals trained in recognizing manipulation and abuse. They revised their leadership evaluation criteria to include not just results, but also team retention, employee satisfaction surveys, and 360-degree feedback from subordinates, peers, and supervisors. Diana, in her new permanent role as department head, became a model for what leadership should look like. She was demanding but fair, pushed people to grow, but supported them when they struggled, celebrated successes publicly, and addressed failures privately. Under her leadership, the department's productivity remained high, but employee satisfaction scores went from the bottom quartile to the top quintile within 6 months. People stopped leaving. In fact, we started getting internal transfer requests from other departments, people who'd heard about the culture shift and wanted to be part of it. I had my own recovery to navigate. The stress of the investigation, the constant vigilance, the fear that everything might fall apart. It had taken a toll I hadn't fully acknowledged. I started having my own panic attacks, usually late at night when I was alone with my thoughts. I'd replay conversations, second-guess decisions, worry that I'd somehow made everything worse instead of better. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. James Kowalski, who specialized in moral injury and vicarious trauma. "You bore witness to suffering," he told me during one of our early sessions. "You saw people being harmed, and you felt responsible for stopping it. That's a heavy burden, even when you succeed. Especially when you succeed, because now you have to process not just what happened, but what could have happened if you'd done nothing." Nathan's journey through this period was perhaps the most complex of all. The investigation and its aftermath had reopened wounds he'd spent a decade trying to heal, but it had also provided something he'd never had: validation. Dr. Foster continued working with him intensively, helping him process the fact that what happened to him at Berkeley had been real, serious, and part of a documented pattern of behavior. "For years, I questioned everything," Nathan told me during one of our phone calls. "I questioned whether I'd overreacted, whether I'd been too sensitive, whether I'd somehow deserved it or brought it on myself. Having professional investigators, psychologists, attorneys, all these credentialed people say, no, this was abuse, this was serious, this caused lasting harm. It's like, I don't know. It's like I can finally stop arguing with myself about whether my pain was legitimate. In March, Nathan sent me an email that made me cry. I got accepted to Oregon State University's computer science program for the fall semester, he wrote. Full-time student, with a scholarship for non-traditional students returning to education. I'm 30 years old, David. I'm going to be in classes with 19-year-olds, starting over in a life I should have had a decade ago. And I'm terrified. But I'm also excited? Is that weird? I'm excited to finally do what she prevented me from doing. I'm excited to prove that she delayed me, but didn't destroy me. Alyssa, Nathan's girlfriend, reached out to me separately to thank me. I've known Nathan for 3 years, she wrote, and I've watched him struggle with anxiety and depression and this constant sense that he's behind, that he's failed somehow. But lately, something's shifted. He's not healed, I don't think he'll ever be fully healed from what that woman did to him, but he's lighter. He's starting to believe that his life can move forward instead of just treading water in the aftermath of trauma. What you did, gathering that evidence, making sure she faced consequences, it gave him something I couldn't give him. Proof that what happened to him mattered. I flew out to Oregon for Nathan's college orientation weekend in August. We hadn't seen each other in person in over a decade, and it was strange and emotional and wonderful. He looked older, obviously, but also somehow younger than when I'd last seen him at that airport, less burdened. We walked around the OSU campus, and Nathan pointed out buildings where his classes would be, talked about his major requirements, worried about whether he'd be able to keep up after so long away from formal education. I keep thinking I'm going to fail, he admitted, that I'll get into these classes and realize I'm not smart enough, that she was right about me being weak and inadequate. Nathan. I stopped walking and turned to face him. The woman who said those things about you, explicitly or implicitly, was fired from her job for systematically abusing people. Her tactics were analyzed by professional psychologists who confirmed they were designed to destroy confidence and induce exactly the kind of self-doubt you're describing. So when you hear that voice in your head telling you you're not good enough, remember that it's not your voice. It's hers. And she was wrong about you then, and she's wrong about you now. Nathan was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. Dr. Foster says something similar. She calls it internalized messages from the perpetrator, or something like that. The idea that abuse doesn't just hurt you in the moment, but leaves these recordings in your head that keep playing long after the abuser is gone. He smiled wryly. She's very technical about it. But yeah, I'm working on distinguishing my actual thoughts from the psychological damage. It's harder than it sounds. The fall semester started, and Nathan threw himself into his coursework with an intensity that worried me at first. But when I called to check on him, he sounded energized rather than overwhelmed. I'm actually good at this, he said, and I could hear the wonder in his voice. Like really good. I'm understanding the material. I'm keeping up with the younger students, and my professors seem to respect my work. It's like, I think I'd convinced myself over the years that maybe I'd never been as smart as I thought, that maybe I'd just been delusional about my abilities. But I'm here now, doing the work I was supposed to do 10 years ago, and I'm succeeding. She didn't take that from me. She delayed it, but she didn't take it. I called Nathan the day the termination was finalized. It's over, I told him. She's gone. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, Did you tell her? About me, I mean? Does she know I was part of this? No. Your name isn't anywhere in the public documents, only in the clinical report, and that's confidential. Good. Another pause. I don't want her to know. I don't want her thinking about me at all. I want her to lose her job and her reputation and never know why. Never understand that it all traced back to some kid she tortured in college. Let her lose everything and spend the rest of her life wondering which one of her victims finally found their voice. Nathan didn't need Veronica to know his name or acknowledge what she'd done. He just needed her to face consequences, to finally be held accountable. The investigation had given him something no amount of therapy or time could provide. External validation that he hadn't been weak, hadn't overreacted, hadn't somehow brought her cruelty upon himself. In March, Nathan sent me an email. He'd been accepted to Oregon State University's computer science program for the fall semester, with a scholarship for non-traditional students. He and Alyssa had gotten engaged. I'm 30 years old, David, he wrote. I'm going to be in classes with 19-year-olds, starting over in a life I should have had a decade ago. I'm terrified, but I'm also excited to finally do what she prevented me from doing, to prove that she delayed me, but didn't destroy me. I never spoke to Veronica again. I don't know where she ended up or whether she faced any professional consequences beyond losing one job. Our mutual non-disparagement agreement meant I couldn't warn other companies about her, couldn't share the investigative report, couldn't do anything except hope that somehow the universe would continue to hold her accountable. But Kyle is still with the company, thriving under Diana's leadership. Rebecca is mentoring new analysts, teaching them how to recognize toxic behavior and advocate for themselves. Diana has implemented new policies around workplace conduct and regular anonymous feedback surveys to catch problems early. And our department, once hemorrhaging talent, has stabilized and grown. On my desk, I keep a photo from my Berkeley graduation, Mom, me, and Nathan, arms around each other's shoulders, grinning at the camera like we had the whole world ahead of us. In the photo, Nathan looks so young, so full of hope and possibility. It reminds me every day why I did what I did, why it mattered. The truth is, I don't know if what we did was justice or revenge or just the universe finally balancing its scales. I don't know if Veronica learned anything or if she's out there right now, targeting someone new at some other company. I don't know if Nathan will ever fully heal from what she did to him, or if the trajectory of his life can ever truly be restored. What I do know is this. I made a promise to a broken 19-year-old kid in an airport 10 years ago, and I kept it. I didn't let her win. I didn't let her get away with it. And maybe that's not everything, but it's something. Nathan told me once, during one of our late-night phone calls after Veronica was fired, that the worst part of being bullied wasn't the actual abuse. It was the silence afterward, the way everyone moved on like nothing happened while you were left to pick up the pieces alone, the way your pain became invisible, inconvenient, something to get over rather than something that mattered. You made it matter, he said. You made my pain matter. That's worth more than you know. I think about that a lot. About the people who suffer in silence because no one believes them or cares enough to act. About the Veronicas of the world who move through life leaving wreckage behind them, protected by professional polish and plausible deniability. About how many victims never get their day, never get their justice, never get to see their abusers face consequences. We got lucky. We had evidence, resources, timing, and a company that ultimately chose to do the right thing when the legal risk became too high to ignore. A lot of people don't get that. A lot of people spend their whole lives waiting for accountability that never comes. But for us, for Nathan, for Kyle and Rebecca and Diana and all the others who suffered under Veronica's cruelty, we got to see her fall. We got to watch her lose everything she valued, to be held accountable at least once, to know that her actions had consequences even if they took a decade to catch up to her. That has to count for something. It's not a perfect ending. Nathan's life is still marked by what happened, Kyle still has anxiety about workplace dynamics, and I still have days where I wonder if we really changed anything, or just won one small battle in a much larger war. But we won the battle. And sometimes, on the days when the world feels dark and justice feels impossible, that's enough. I don't know if Veronica Ashford ever thinks about the people she hurt. I don't know if she lies awake at night wondering which one of us finally told our story loud enough to be heard. I hope she does. I hope every person she ever tormented haunts her dreams, a chorus of voices she can't escape saying, "We remember, we survived, and we made sure you'd pay." That's not really revenge. It's not even justice, not in any cosmic sense. But it's something. It's the only thing we had the power to do, so we did it. And now I can look at that photo on my desk, at Nathan's young, hopeful face, and know that I honored the promise I made to him. Don't let her win. I didn't. If you enjoyed this, you ODM will definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now, and let me know your take in the comments.